So we just got some more updates for Dune Awakening, which, if you aren't aware already, is the MMO survival crafting game built in the universe of, well, Dune, of Frank Herbert's Dune. In a recent interview, Jeff Bylos went over a number of different hints of what the end game is going to be, as well as some confirming features about the upcoming MMO that's currently in closed beta. We really don't know too much about it, but this is kind of getting us an idea of what's coming forward. He talks about things like the size of the map, PvE and PvP, what dungeons are going to look like, and as well as, of course, base building, where you're going to be spending a lot of your time. So let's go ahead and review all. So the first major thing that Jeff goes over is the maps. Now, the biggest thing that sticks out in my mind is that he has confirmed that the maps in Dune Awakening are 9 times the size of the Conan Exiles map, which is incredibly huge. That is unbelievably large. And the major difference that he'd like to put is that if you saw in like Conan Exiles where you might have like these different instances, there are essentially 10 maps that are all joined together around the deep desert, where that is going to be somewhat of the central hub. It's supposed to be seamless and no transfers, of course, across the board. So that's a good thing. And then each week, their shifting sands mechanic completely wipes the board for what was going on in the deep desert, and offers a brand new feature and brand new dungeons and other various things that are available all across the sands. The main reason that Jeff really hinted at this is that this is showing the difference between a simple, we'll say, survival game where you were just isolated to one individual map versus a survival MMO where you can have up to 500 players on a single map, especially in the deep desert. Now, it also really seems like Jeff hinted at the idea of the shield wall, and what he is putting at as not having someone being able to come over and knock down your sandcastle. Essentially, what they want to eliminate in this game, and especially in this survival MMO, is that when you build your building, you craft your perfect little house out on the dunes of Arrakis, you won't have some other player come in while you are not logged in and destroy everything that you work. Now, this is actually a very interesting note because that's what a lot of players are like, oh man, I logged in and my whole base was ruined. And it's like, well, if you are not there, essentially your base is protected. You shouldn't have to worry about that. They want to focus on other aspects of, we'll say, player versus player or competition, and that actually leads me into the end game of what they're focusing on. So there is a survival aspect, of course, within the shield wall, where that's where your base is, and that's where you're going to be able to craft your perfect building. And there is the need to fight the elements and fight, everything else that you're going to have to do in Arrakis. But what they talked about in the deep desert is essentially it is a player versus environment. So of course there is player versus player activity, but there's also a heavy emphasis on survival and dealing with enemy NPCs and things that are of that sort. So there is both PvP and PvE elements to it. Now the deep desert seems like where you're going to be probably putting a lot of your time and coordinating with your guilds to get the resources to be able to build your bases and build and craft everything that you are going to need. And Jeff also confirmed that the ecology labs, which I've hinted at in a previous video, where they talk about these ancient kind of vaults that have been left for 10,000 years and stuff like that, those are essentially going to be the dungeons. You go in and there's a new instance, there's new enemies, there's new creatures that you're going to go have to fight. And these are available within that deep desert. And obviously, as I mentioned, the shifting sands technique where you're having all of these basically re-wiped and moved everywhere and redone elsewhere, then that is a fresh way to keep you coming back with new content and almost like a new environment to go in. It's a brand new Dune each week. And Jeff also confirmed that there is a strong emphasis of PvP in this game. There, of course, is strong emphasis in PvP. But not the typical kill as many players as you can. It's more so you are fighting other players or competing against other players for valuable resources, of course, such as spice, or we'll even say water or Solari, or, a downed ship or what have you. You're fighting other players specifically so that you can get the resources, gain the resources, and then have that edge for your own economy, your base, or your guild. Jeff also confirmed that you can absolutely play the game without having any emphasis on player versus player. So those PvE enjoyers who just want to go out into the world of Arrakis, deal with that whole monster of itself, and then just come back without having to worry about the threat of enemy players, you absolutely can. He identified 3 different types of areas that you're going to be able to be in. So you have your guild peace area where there is no player versus player combat. And then you have your, we'll say, middle ground where you're having partial warfare or something along those lines. And then, of course, your War of Assassins, which is straight player versus player, full tilt, everything that you got. And I'd imagine that you would see some of those areas sprinkled in as you go through. But if you are just strictly a PvE enjoyer who wants to build their perfect little base on Arrakis, you can definitely go and do that by avoiding these specific areas. Now again, with it being one giant instanced map, you can also understand that as they are going from map to map, or area to area, I should say, you're going to have that pop-up come across your screen that says, hey, this is a PvP area. Just so that you know that you could, okay, I need to turn around and get away from there if I don't want to do player versus player, or I don't feel that I'm capable enough doing player versus player yet. You have the option. So they brought up a specific point, of course, wrapping up with player versus player in the end game, that you can use your ornithopter, for example, and capture an enemy spice harvester while it's doing its thing, transfer it back to your base. Of course, you're essentially taking that particular piece of their vehicle arsenal. However, the problem is that when you get back, soldiers will pop out and they will start attacking you because they are the enemy spice harvester. They're going to jump out and attack you. So it's less like, haha, I took your spice harvester, there's nothing that you can do about it. No, there's a whole party of enemies that are waiting for you the second that that thing lands, even if you put it back into your base. So I'm curious to see how they balance this out, because I could see, you know, essentially you load them into this like death bay, and your bay has a bunch of, we'll say, self-defenses or automatic defenses that pop out that essentially remove the threat completely. And then all you're doing is just going out there and stealing spice harvesters. I'd be very curious to see what they do with this. I'm interested. Not 100%. Leading into that, they also talked about your own mobility vehicles, or well, we'll say your vehicles that are specifically meant for movement. So ornithopters, sand cycles, things along those lines. They have hinted that they can't be stolen per se right now. Like you can't just jump onto someone's harvester or jump into someone's ornithopter and fly away with it while they're dealing with something in the spice. It essentially works into a permission system. So you can set it that anyone in your guild can use your vehicle and fly away. And also, if your vehicle gets destroyed in an area that is like in the deep desert there, where it's very difficult for you to get back to a safe place, you'll be able to respawn your vehicle. And they say once right now, but I'm sure that, you know, like if that happens and you get that respawn, it's like, well, crap, I do have to go back now because I'm down to my last respawn. It's like a spare tire in that sense. But you can steal non-player control. You can steal NPC vehicles that are just laying around. However, they've also hinted that those are going to be of lesser quality. They're not going to be as effective or what have you, but it is a means of transportation. Now, I'm curious if they build in a reputation system built into that. So within the guilds and everything that you have, and you're there and you're capturing NPCs, ornithopters, and their sand cycles, and you're just taking them, that you build up like a renown where it's like you can't visit the trading post, you can't visit the exchange or anything like that, because essentially you're a wanted criminal. I'd be very, very interested to see them do that. That would be a very cool feature. And of course, with any type of player versus environment or survival game, they essentially have your different styles of death. Now, the death that is going to be the most important to avoid is, of course, by the sandworm. Essentially, once you die with the sandworm, you lose everything that you have equipped on your body. If you don't put everything into like your bank or into your own personal base, and then you get eaten by a sandworm, everything is gone. You can't recover it. It's done. However, it seems that if you die in any other, we'll say, specific mode, so like if you get killed out in the deep desert, you can recover your corpse and get your equipment back. However, enemies can also loot your corpse and take whatever items that you have if they can get to you in time before you can. And then also paired with that is that if you are in one of the dungeons, the ecology labs, you'll be able to recover your body afterwards, after you've gone and done what you needed to out and about. So there are these different levels, we'll say, of flexibility when it comes to deaths in this game. And they also talk about some of the checkpoints, so to speak, like easier respawns that you can do. You can have them set at your home base. You can have them set with your vehicle, so you respawn at wherever your vehicle was parked, which could also be interesting for like some fast travel. Like if you know that you're just going out to collect something, you can just store all of your equipment into the bike, go out into the wilds, die, respawn back at your vehicle after you've gathered whatever you needed to. And of course, lastly, the big one being beacon respawn. So essentially, if you're out and about, you can set down a beacon where it's basically, if I die wherever I'm at, I'm going to be able to respawn from right there. So they're offering these different levels of variability of what you can do when you die, because again, it's a survival game. You want to survive as long as you can, but you're probably going to die at some point. So keep that in mind. And the last major thing that Jeff talks about, and I kind of wrap this all up into one bubble, is essentially the future expansions, the monetization, and as well as the release date that we could hope for. Now, what he has talked about as far as the expansions is that they are solely focused right currently on the game and making sure that it is up to snuff for when they release it. Of course, what they want and what we want if we're going to be paying money for this game. Now, the idea of it is that if the game goes well and they are able to eventually expand onto the game, the idea is that they will expand first within the Arrakis homeworld and all the different other zones, like for example the polar ice caps, which are a part of the Dune lore. That could be an area that you go and explore. And as they flesh out the rest of the world, the idea is that you could eventually go off planet and explore and survive onto a different planet, because there are these different planets within the solar system that is available for them to use, which I think is a very cool idea, is that it isn't just going to be straight Arrakis and straight Dune. In the books and in the lore, they go to these different areas. And again, I'm still reading the lore, so don't 100% quote me on that. But they have already talked about what they could do in the future if the game goes the way that they're hoping. Now, the big thing that a lot of people are probably curious is the monetization. They've talked about being able to keep the servers running, keeping the game running, which honestly, with something like this and it's constantly being developed and worked on, it sounds very much like what you would expect for a subscription-based MMO. Now, I'm not 100% sure on that, and they haven't given us any information. Jeff didn't even confirm that, but I see two potential models happening for it. The first one being is a monthly subscription. That would be the most feasible for this idea, and probably the most from most people, and a lot of people won't want to play it. But the other one could be very much like the Guild Wars 2 method, where it's like the buy once, play forever, or buy once, and divvy up however you want to. What I'm really hoping that they don't do is just bog down the game with microtransactions. Like, I'm not saying that a game shouldn't have a cash shop or anything like that. I get it. Games are trying to make as much money as possible because they are a business. But if they are going to do a cash shop or anything like that, make it all things that don't affect the gameplay, right? Show us things that are specifically cosmetic, that are for looks. They're very simplistic. You don't ever have to worry about anything that is increasing other players' power levels because they put more money into the game with game-breaking monetization. Again, nothing solidified on that. Very minimal, mum's the word here. So we got to take what we get. And then lastly, the release date. So the release date for Dune Awakening, nothing has been said. And what they have highlighted, and Jeff has stressed this basically every time that he's talked about this game, is that it is going to be ready when it is ready. So the idea is just let them do their thing, let them cook, and just take their time. Which, again, gives me more time to talk about the game and all the updates and all the wish list items that I have coming up for it. But all in all, I think that this is a very good preview, a very good idea of what we could potentially get here in the future. I'm excited for it because I think that Dune Awakening is going to be a fantastic game. So I'm just giddy about it. So if you want to see some more information about Dune Awakening and what classes were dropped and some of the skill trees, you can click this video here, which will go ahead and show you the whole review, the analyzation of all of the still screenshots that were shared with us. Again, we're still in closed beta. We have very little gameplay to go with. Aside from that, stay caffeinated, sleepers.